Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. We're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 3, Text 7 and Text 8. So, Text 8. Itam karma gatir gachan Bahiya Bhadra Vaha Puman Abhuta Samplavat Sarga Pralayav Ashnute Vasha Itam Karma Gatir Gachan Bhavabhadra Vaha Puman Abhuta Samplavat Sargam Pralaya Vashnute Vasha Itam Karma Gatir Gachan Bahiya Bhadra Vaha Puman Abhuta Samplavat Sarga Pralaya Vashnute Vasha. Please chant. Itam Karma Gatir Gachan Bahiya Bhadra Vaha Puman Abhuta Samplavat Sarga Pralaya Vashnute Vasha. Itam Karma Gatir Gachan Bahiya Bhadra Vaha Puman Abhuta Samplavat Sarga Pralaya Vashnute Vasha. Itam Karma Gatir Gachan Bhavabhadra Vaha Puman Abhuta Samplavat Sarga Pralaya Vashnute Vasha. Thank you very much for chanting the word for word, and this is BBT translation, as is when we come to the next verse, the purport. Itam, in this way, karma gati, the destinations determined by his past activities. Gachan, obtaining. Bahu abhadra, much that is inauspicious. Vaha, which involve. Puman, the living being. Abhuta Samplavat, until the dissolution of the created universe. Sarga Pralayao, birth and death. Ashnute, he experiences. Avasha, helplessly. And the translation, and this is Sri Antariksha talking to King Nimi. Thus, the conditioned living entity is forced to experience repeated birth and death. Impelled by the reactions of his own activities, he helplessly wanders from one inauspicious situation to another, suffering from the moment of creation until the time of cosmic annihilation. And the purport. According to Srila Madhvacharya, after hearing that the living entity is repeatedly subjected to birth and death within the material world, if one still considers such a helpless entity equal to God in all respects, one will surely fall into the darkest regions of the universe from which it is difficult to rise. Text 8. Datu paplava ashane vyaktam dravya gunatmakam anadi nitana kalo hiyavyaktaya pakashati. And the translation for text 8. When the annihilation of the material elements is imminent, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his form of eternal time, withdraws the manifest cosmos consisting of gross and subtle features, and the entire universe vanishes into non-manifestation. The purport. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Kapila Dev teaches that the material nature originally exists in an inert state of equilibrium called pradhan. When Lord Vishnu casts his potent glance in the form of kala or time, material interactions take place, culminating in the variegated creation of the material cosmos. In this verse, it is stated that at the end of universal time, the same kala that originally incited the female nature into manifestation again withdraws the cosmos into its original state of inert non-manifestation. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the time potency itself, kala, is then withdrawn, and it merges into the Supreme Soul, who manifests himself as the original cause of material nature. Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Such technical arrangements for creation and annihilation, birth and death, do not exist in the eternal spiritual kingdom of God. In the spiritual sky, the variegated spiritual enjoyment of the Lord and his devotees is not hampered by the inferior cycles of birth, maintenance, and destruction found in the material world. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadanti Kam Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vrindavan Ishvari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpataribhya Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimata Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll just read the verse again. Text 7. Thus, the conditioned living entity is forced to experience repeated birth and death. Impelled by the reactions of his own activities, he helplessly wanders from one inauspicious situation to another, suffering from the moment of creation until the time of cosmic annihilation. And text 8. When the annihilation of the material elements is imminent, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his form of eternal time, withdraws the manifest cosmos, consisting of gross and subtle features, and the entire universe vanishes into non-manifestation. So, the picture that's been painted by Sri Antariksha of the helpless jiva, that's a picture that's emerging. So helplessness lies in the fact that the jiva, that means the eternal individual soul, obtains various bodies and attains birth and death until the destruction of the universe. So it's an ongoing process that that individual soul is being subjected to. So the eternally individual soul is not only obtaining various bodies, when at death he changes his body, but is in fact changing bodies at every moment. So the situation is even more extreme when you really think about it. So this is so because sometimes he's appearing as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. And Lord Krishna gives an explanation of this fact. Of this changing body of the eternally individual soul. So there's the soul and there's these changing bodies going on perpetually, even in the present body, one could say. So this is how Krishna explains it. And it's from Bhagavad Gita 2:11. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change, and the Sanskrit for that, dehinosmin yata dehe, komaram yovaram jara, tata dehantara praptir, diras tatra namuyati. It is these changes of body which account for the different types of enjoyment or suffering. So there's the question, why is there change? Why is there change in the body? And Srila Prabhupada notes that it is on account of one's work in life. That's the reason for the changes in the body. And this is also the statement by Sri Antariksha. So various bodies are obtained by karma, the definition of which is material activities from which one incurs subsequent reactions. So there's a reaction to one's material activities. So you can trace it back that is given as the reason for the changes going on in the body. It's the result of one's material activities and the consequent reactions. So one doesn't usually think it's a reaction when a child is moving to being a youth, but the work is changing. Like there's greater, more in-depth study, more awareness of one's position in society, and then needless to say, a young person moving into adulthood where the responsibilities become even more intense study, more negotiation with the world in terms of one's sense of belonging, one's relationship with one's family. Everything is rethought. So there's a switch in activities and mindset. So if one looks at change, there's always the question, should everything be changed? You know, one can ask that question. Or alternatively, should nothing be changed? Because here we're hearing the arrangement is actually there's ongoing change that's manifesting physiologically. And this is all separate from oneself as a spirit soul inhabiting that body that's changing. So not only physiological change, but subtle change, the mind, the ego, the intelligence, everything's changing. So naturally one looks at how changes should be initiated and how changes should be carried out. Generally in the world, if one's thinking of a change, you look at how it's going to be done and how it's going to be carried out. So usually some strategies have to be figured out if there's going to be a change. And because in order to carry out a change, you have to have strategies. Okay, this needs to be done, that needs to be done, this change needs to take place, I have to arrange for that. So there's strategies. And naturally, this has to be done in an intelligent and responsible way. I mean, it's absolutely essential. So if, say, hypothetically, this is hypothetically, say the temple was to acquire a neighboring building. One could say that this is a change, but for it to be an intelligent and responsible change, there would have to be a deep consideration of anticipated growth that necessitates such additional physical space. So in the temple, of course, this is highly hypothetical, but if the temple were to truly be an educational institution that made space for young persons to come in and ashrams were formed, then possibly one could consider, a change may be needed, an additional physical change may be required, so let us intelligently look how we can go about this. Something that necessitates that additional physical space. So that's just an hypothetical example. So the interesting point made by Sri Antariksha is that the changes in the body, according to one's material activities and the subsequent reactions, involve great misfortune. That's the word he uses. So one's material activities, the subsequent reactions, they involve great misfortune. So he says it straight. There's great misfortune. So to examine the actions and the reactions of karma is a question that was asked by Maharaj Parikshit, and this is from Srimad Bhagavatam in the 2nd canto, the 4th chapter, the 14th verse. So this is the question he poses to Sukadev Goswami. Kindly describe how the proportionate accumulation of the reactions resulting from the different modes of material nature acts upon the desiring living being, promoting or degrading him among the different species of life, beginning from the demigods down to the most insignificant creatures. So from his question, one can understand that all the work done in a material way of being, meaning that is bearing subsequent reactions, it's accumulated. There's like a collection of those material activities, then have a consequent accumulation of reactions that are happening. They're getting stored. So this accumulated action and reaction of karma or work done as a material activity becomes manifest in the same proportion. So exactly how much material activities you did, there's a consequent stockpile of reactions. It's the same proportion, action and reaction. It's proportionate. So Lord Krishna explains how the connection with material nature is made, because we want to see this, because that was one of the points made by Parikshit Maharaj, where he says how this proportionate accumulation, action and reaction is happening, is resulting from the different modes of material nature. So we want to look at how is that connection with material nature made? Because everybody in the world is experiencing this and functioning in this way. So Lord Krishna explains how this connection with material nature is made. So Krishna puts it this way, Bhagavad Gita 14:5. Material nature consists of 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by the three modes. So just coming in contact with material nature. So that's Satyam Rajastama iti, Guna Prakriti Sambhava, Nibadananti Mahabaho, Dehe Dehinam Avyayam. So because of cultural experiences, different concepts of the relation of the mind to matter and to the organic body take place. It's often a cultural experience. And it comes to affect the concepts that happen in the mind, and naturally this has, from the subtle, it has an effect on the organic body. So Lord Krishna describes the relation of mind to matter with regard to those operating in goodness, for example, when in contact with nature. So remember how you connect with nature. There's the three ways of being by which you can connect. So here's Lord Krishna, I'm choosing one. Those who come in contact with nature in a way in goodness. So he says, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in this mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. So you notice, that was Bhagavad Gita 14.6. Just operating in goodness, the conceptual change in the mind is such that knowledge awakens, and there's a sense of happiness. So the mind experiences happiness, and naturally the intelligence is kicking in when there's a greater understanding of everything. So those situated in this mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. So that's if one's connecting with material nature in a way of goodness. So Srila Prabhupada compares the types of conditioning. If one considers the change that comes about due to performing work in the mode of goodness, then the change of body is such that one can reside in heaven. So see how just the manner in which you're performing your work is affecting the change in the body that takes place. And particularly the change of body at the end of that stockpile of accumulated action and reaction. The body that one then moves into is one that allows one to reside, to have residence in a different place, in heaven. So this conditioning of mind in relation to matter in goodness creates a mentality that promotes one to a planet where more intelligent beings are residing. So the promotion, as an aside, has to do with meeting a criterion of being in the mode of goodness in the same way that the American government restricts the entrance of foreigners, since the criterion to be met is one of prosperity. So if persons are coming from a poverty-stricken or a war-torn country, the American government is going to be very hesitant about allowing those foreigners in, because the idea is that this is a prosperous country, so those persons haven't shown themselves to be prosperous, so not sure yet if we want to permit them to enter. I mean, it's kind of not wanting to share the prosperity. So in the same way, if one's actually going to be entering the heavenly region, then the criterion to be met is that one's in the mode of goodness. One's mentality is in goodness. So, because that will then allow for the persons already residing there to be comfortable to accept a person entering. So you have to meet certain criteria. Now, so that's a comparison that Srila Prabhupada makes. So proportionate actions of goodness are needed to qualify one for such a promotion to the higher planetary system. And Srila Prabhupada adds to this idea of this proportionate accumulation of actions. So in our current planet of residence, one cannot achieve a good position within the social order without being qualified with proportionate good work. So the example he gives, Srila Prabhupada, is that of a high court judge, which requires the necessary qualification. And the same thing goes for any other very prominent position. One has to have the proportionate amount of work that fits for occupying that position. So the other aspect of the conditioning or the learning is that a person functioning in goodness in material nature becomes conditioned to feel advanced in knowledge. So there's a learning that's happening just by functioning in goodness, and that's what conditioning means. You're learning that if you're functioning this way, a sense of happiness comes. So that then becomes conditioned behavior, because you're going to repeat that behavior in order to get that feeling of happiness. That's what conditioning is. It's a kind of learning. So, and on the ego level, the person will come to see himself or herself as being better than others. So this is actually a person functioning in goodness and how the conditioning happens. So there's a contact with material nature, and then the actions or the work that's performed is in goodness. So it's actually doing things that are beneficial for the world, beneficial for others, doing things that are bringing a strong moral fiber into the society. I mean, that example of the High Court judge that Srila Prabhupada gives. So, but there's a consequent learning that's going on. Just by performing work in that kind of way, the mentality becomes one of actually beginning to feel superior to others. So that's a kind of learning that goes on. And the other learning is that one actually comes to understand that actually one is getting happier through performing work in goodness. So that's conditioning is happening, because then you're going to be repeating that kind of action to have that sense of happiness or superiority. So Srila Prabhupada explains using two examples. He says there's the philosopher and there's the scientist. So they feel a material sense of happiness. And the reason being that they improve the condition of their lives. So when one is actually functioning in this way of goodness, the conditions of one's life also improve. So not only is one performing work that is beneficial for society because it's either advancing philosophical understanding, so it's utilizing intelligence, that kind of external help in society, giving external help to society, is also having a positive effect on the person, that their own life condition improves. There's a very nice gentleman that visits here who is a philosophy professor, or is retired now, but when he explains his life situation, you understand there's great happiness because of the very wonderful family that he has around himself, and this is that having functioned in the mode of goodness, and also having learned what it is that brings happiness. So even in retirement, the person is putting together philosophical material, some manuscript that's going to be published. So one continues the work that is for the benefit of society, and one's improving one's own life condition. The learning is there. You perform that action, that kind of work, and the reaction you're going to get is that enhanced sense of well-being, happiness. So this binds the person to goodness in material nature. And it attracts them to work in this mode of nature. And as long as they continue to work in goodness, they have to take a body in that mode of nature. So the change that's happening, because we ask the question, should there be change? Well, the change is that there's a continuation in terms of when the body has to change, it's going to be another body that's going to contact material nature in the mode of goodness. So there's a kind of, you could say, change, but of the same kind, so to speak, because that's answering the question, should there be change and how should it take place? So now text 8 moves to a different subject matter. And it's a subject matter that's then going to be covered in the next 8 verses. And the link between the verse we just discussed of, working in contact with, in the mode of material nature and the changes that come about, this next text, that first verse just brings up that this change will keep going on until the destruction of the universe. And this particular text is dealing with the destruction of the universe. But in fact, it's a whole other topic, the destruction of the universe. So Srila Vishwanath states that when destruction of the material elements happen, time pulls the products composed of gross and subtle matter into the cause, the prakriti, the material nature. So naturally one can ask the question, is change always desirable? We're hearing that there's going to be destruction, so that's a huge change. And does change always mean that something worse or something better happens? You look at that question. Naturally, if you're observing and you're understanding that this is what goes on. So to look at these questions, one can start with the premise. The material world is a world of death. That's the initial premise. It's a world of death. And Srila Prabhupada states, this life is a sort of high with material nature, which imposes death upon all. Isn't that extraordinary? It's interesting, the comparison, because when one thinks of somebody who's addicted to a substance, there's that sense of euphoria in taking the substance, but it's going to accelerate death. So actually, even if there isn't taking of any substance, just residing in a place that's a world of death, Srila Prabhupada says that this life is a sort of high with material nature, which imposes death upon all. So quite intense analysis. So that actually comes from Bhagavad Gita 2:14, I think, the purport. So the category of persons performing work under material nature. So we're going to look at that category, which is basically everyone in this world. They're performing work under material nature. And this is what happens. They become experienced. Everyone becomes sufficiently experienced through performing work in material nature. But they still do not see their inevitable destruction. They don't see it. This is a very extraordinary thing. And the experience lies in the fact why they become experienced is because they see that persons they knew before them, like their elders, their predecessors, they've already become deceased. They're not there anymore. And they become experienced because they also see that their countrymen become deceased. So in actual fact, everyone should be able to understand that there's a great struggle that's going on in the world. There's a great struggle because there's always this change that's waiting. This change, not only is there this physiological change, this mental, egotistical change that's going on through life, but at the end, there's even more profound change where the body has to switch. So, in fact, there's a great struggle. And it's for this reason that persons working in material nature do not inquire into the problems of life. Actually, they don't want to. And I've had it be told to me. I've brought up the topic of looking more closely at, the philosophical condition that one finds oneself in. And I've actually been told, I don't wish to think about it. I don't wish to think about it. When I was quite young in New York, I remember presenting something to someone and I got told that somebody who was sort of well known in society. And I remember being surprised. So, but this is actually the case. Persons don't wish to inquire into the problems of life. And the way the Srimad Bhagavatam puts it is, although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. It's inevitable. That change is a kind of destruction. It's a destruction of the existing changing body. So the changes that transpired in terms of the cosmos, the whole universe, it's explained by the Avadhuta Brahmana in the 11th canto, of Srimad Bhagavatam in the 9th chapter. So this is how he puts it, that the change that's happening on the universal level. The Lord of the universe, Narayan, is the worshipable God for all living entities. Without extraneous assistance, the Lord creates the universe by his own potency. And at the time of annihilation, because that's what we're looking at, the Lord destroys the universe through his personal expansion of time and withdraws all of the cosmos, including all the conditioned living entities within himself. Thus, his unlimited self is the shelter and the reservoir of all potencies. The subtle pradhan, the basis of all cosmic manifestation, is conserved within the Lord, and it is in this way not different from him. In the aftermath of annihilation, the Lord stands alone. So there was an explanation given by the Avanti Brahmana, something of the change that transpires when the whole cosmos is withdrawn into the body of the Lord. In fact, all the conditioned souls are taken within himself. So from that, you can understand that actually he's the shelter and the reservoir of all kinds of spiritual strength. And the material nature, that's a subtle pradhan, the basis of the cosmic manifestation, is conserved within him. So you could say in one sense it's not different from him. But at any rate, after the annihilation, the Lord stands alone. That's the understanding of the Avanti Brahmana. So this change as such, creation to annihilation, can be compared to a spider that's spreading or creating and then withdrawing a web. So all universal affairs are conducted by the potencies of the Lord himself, and Narayan remains the shelter of all existence. His personal body is the shelter of all existence. And Mahavishnu, who's a plenary portion of Lord Krishna, is the personality from whose body expands the innumerable potencies that manifest the material and spiritual worlds. And within his Brahmajyoti, or spiritual effulgence, rests the three worlds. So this picture that emerges from this text 8 is precisely the picture that can only actually come about if one starts to inquire into the great struggle for existence that one's going through in this material world. And it requires being cognizant of the changes that are happening and actually understanding that one needs to actually prepare oneself or understand better the changes and be more at peace instead of denying denying change and even ignoring that there's inevitable destruction, is the way it's put, at the end of the particular lifetime. So this was an examination of these two verses. I hope there was some clarity. I'm not sure, but if you have some further thought to add to our discussion, please feel free.
The subject matter of eternal time is sort of mysterious in one sense. It's one of the 5 elements of knowledge that is described in the Bhagavad Gita. And of all of them, is the one that, when you study the Bhakti Shastri and you study the Bhagavad Gita, it's the one that have the less information, Kala, eternal time. And one thing that you understand is the potency of the Lord that makes the experience of the material world possible for the eternal living entity. So, you place time into eternity, and then it's not a compatible thing. It's what makes everything change, it's what makes everything go from beginning to end, so it creates that whole thing. So it's interesting as the explanations appears through the Bhagavatam and the scriptures of time is described in the purport as the glance of Lord Mahavishnu. So with the glance, that energy becomes manifested. And with that glance, you start the whole material nature becomes alive. So that's Kala. I think, it's explained that. And then that same energy is the one that maintains the material world, and the same energy that withdraw everything back into Pradam, or the unmanifested, material nature. So it's quite, interesting in one sense to further understand. So it is explained that it's one of the topics to understand of transcendental knowledge, to have that proper understanding of Krishna and his activities in this world. So yeah, you're thinking as that it is an important item to fully understand. So I just wanted to add that.
Oh, thank you very much for bringing up the the thread, really, that is there, that can be identified as coming from the spiritual potency of the Supreme Lord, that from a materialistic perspective is just broken down into minutes, hours, days, months, years, but in actual fact it's a spiritual potency that is activating everything and giving like a continuity to everything. It actually gives continuity. Yeah, and it's interesting that the activation of that by the glance of the Supreme Lord is allowing for the changes that were so much the topic of this particular discourse. So thank you for drawing attention to that particular component that you could say, it gives continuity to everything. The spiritual potency of the Supreme Lord.
Yeah, it's something to understand of Krishna's, activities, because in one sense this potency of Kala is only applicable in the material world and is specific to the material world. It's almost like the sign that this is the thing that fuels or moves or makes the whole thing functioning, So it's very specific, and so that you can appreciate the design nature of the material world, and also the Krishna's intelligence, supreme intelligence, sort of involved with how the whole thing functions and why. Without this potency of eternal time, then there is no material experience, because the material experience is what goes with all these changes, birth and death and all these things. And that's only possible by Kala. So, so it's an important topic.
Yeah, it's very extraordinary, because that's what actually defines the great struggle, by virtue of the fact, as you pointed out, it's so brilliantly designed by Lord Krishna that the struggle is fighting against time. One's fighting against Krishna's spiritual potency. Basically, one doesn't want to age. I walk, in my walk home, I pass a little storefront that has written on it a big sheet of the treatments they offer. And they're all treatments that basically are fighting the effects of time on a physiological level. So the injection of substances, gel-like substances that are going to be injected into the muscle to boost facial contour or something. So, you can reverse the changes that come with time on a physiological level. So that's part of the struggle. There's resistance. There's resistance to change. So one's fighting with Krishna's potency, as opposed to actually going inward and getting reflective and asking, why are things arranged this way? What is it that one can actually understand? So that would be much more an intelligent approach, rather than going through further torture.
Yeah, in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is one of the few parts of the Gita in which Kala is defined by Krishna, and the way he defines it is, I am the destroyer. So Kala is a destroyer. So it's an impossible fight. It's just designed to make you miserable and bring you to the realization that, or questioning the whole thing, why? Why this whole struggle? It's an impossible win. So it's designed to bring the conditioned soul to understand that this is not a place for me to be, and this is not a pursuit that is natural for me. It just, it becomes is how you say, is what makes the whole thing, impels the conditioned soul to go towards spiritual realization.
Yes, because one wants continuity that is continuously happy. That's what one aspires for, continuous happiness. And the lesson one's getting is that there isn't that continuity of happiness, but rather it's constant disruption through change. And the change is graphic. There's a mental struggle with adaptation to the changes that happen externally and in the environment, because there's nothing constant in the world. So indeed, it's quite a brilliant design to allow one to actually philosophically explore what is one's purpose in being here, and what will allow one to have that continuous happiness. So, yeah, it's one truly has to have great respect for that spiritual potency of the Supreme Lord that keeps the material nature activated, so that there is the opportunity to actually learn and become more introspective. I mean, what an opportunity there is, and it's so odd that persons choose to turn their back on that opportunity, but instead try and force artificially some happiness through trying to create stability when there is none, because of the continuous changing nature of the world and one's own body and one's own mind, and just in adapting. Yeah, it's quite an extraordinary design.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you so much for your class. I was thinking about material nature laws that I once heard that when pure devotee has a desire, the material nature and material energies change themselves to help realize that desire. As good as like Krishna, if Krishna desires something in material world. Now, like whenever somebody is living in any place, in any country, it's good to understand the laws of that country. So if you are living in material world, it's good to understand laws of material world. And I am not, like, I don't see in education like people are studying metaphysical things or any, like understanding, like there are laws of cause and effect, and understanding the nature of mind. And it's helpful if people would understand these things, and then devotional service will naturally help them even transcend those laws. But I feel like that is lacking in our education system.
So what you're saying is lacking is the person's making the connection with a devotional life?
Yes, like broader understanding of reality, that that there are greater laws at work, and even above that is devotional service, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes one doesn't have to even understand a law initially or see it written, but then you experience a certain effect based on your actions, which makes you realize you're actually operating in a very controlled environment. So, say even a person who's going to work every day. So, I stand on a train platform and I see lots of people taking the train to their office. So those persons are every day repeating a particular activity, day in and day out, at least for 5 days in the week. They're performing that activity of going to the train station, getting on a train, going to their office, spending so many hours in the office, coming back on the train. So when you perform an activity over and over again, it should actually lead to some understanding. I'm actually performing work, and the reason I perform the work is for maintenance. And I'm actually going to be doing this for 40 years of my life. And then after that, my body's going to be too decrepit and I won't be able to do it. So one can say, okay, this is all that life's made up of: toil and maintenance. But the thoughtful person will think, I actually need strength, mental strength, to be able to actually do this on a daily basis and for 40 years of my life. And with the demands that are there within my family, etc. So I need to draw on greater strength to actually even be able to execute this. So a thoughtful person, and a person that's becoming aware that, okay, in this material world there's a law. You have to actually work in order to maintain yourself. You have to perform duties. So a thoughtful person thinking like that will also understand that it requires more strength than they may personally have to be able to do that for that length of time and so consistently. So it's again up to it requires thoughtfulness. It requires thoughtfulness. So to make the leap to understanding that there's activity that is of a spiritual nature that will bring one happiness and strength and fortitude to be able to perform one's duties, it requires the thoughtfulness on the part of a person, and one may fortunately, if one is beginning to think, be a little bit thoughtful, one may have the good fortune to be exposed to that kind of transcendental knowledge. But it requires thoughtfulness. Because generally you find that the persons that do get exposed to transcendental literature, they've already started being thoughtful. They're already beginning to question things. So otherwise they just, as you pointed out, they are subjected to material laws. So the material law is the actions that are being performed are going to have reactions. And the reactions are cumulative. So the change of body based on these activities, the work that's been done for 40 years and the mood in which it's done and the nature of the work will dictate the next body, without the person having been thoughtful and cognizant, or having even a say in anything. So, thoughtfulness, which will give that opportunity for exposure to literature that deals with transcendental subject matter.
Like even transcendental subject matters. And I also meant that that like understanding the bigger picture also. Like previously, yogis would understand like how this world is working, and they will act accordingly in harmony with with nature. And they now in this material world, like currently, everybody is acting, majority of people are acting from a position of lack, and they're trying to squeeze as much as they can out of things for their survival. It's not acting from a place of abundance and not understanding bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting observation, that even the mindset that is accompanying work that's been done is a mindset of feeling lack. So that is part of material nature acting upon one, where one's not acknowledging that and showing respect for Lord Krishna's creation, or his hand behind everything. So when that respect is not shown, it takes that form of actually some sinful activities are done, or a sinful mentality maybe there, where there's exploitation of the environment. So you read about it all the time, the companies that dump chemical waste into waterways, and companies that pollute the environment through the products they're creating. So that's coming from that mentality you're describing, some having a disrespect for nature even. And so sinful activity is performed, and that separates one even more from the proper understanding of one's place in the universe. And that experience of lack has to do with performing sinful activities. Yeah, it's a consequence. Yeah, one's even more dissociated from the reality. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your very kind attention. We've gone a little long. Thank you for thinking about the subject matter. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.